Hello, in this video we will be taking a look at this week's project assignment, in which you are tasked with completing a risk assessment for your course project. Project risk is defined as an uncertain event that can have a positive or negative impact on the project. Every project will have some risk associated with it. However, the amount of risk varies from project to project. If project risks aren't properly managed, they can significantly impact a project, often in terms of scheduling or cost changes. Therefore, it's important to properly plan and actively manage all your project risks. One way to do this is to complete a risk plan. That is your task for this week. Complete a risk analysis and a risk register. I have provided a template for you to use, so let's go ahead and take a look at that. The first step in risk planning is to identify all the project's risks, both positive and negative. In the risk analysis, you will identify your project's risks along with the individual risk characteristics. The two different risk types are quantitative and qualitative. As you learned in your reading this week, quantitative risks are risks that you can assign a monetary value to. If the event or risk occurs, it will result in costing of X amount of dollars. Qualitative risks, on the other hand, are risks that it's very difficult or impossible to calculate its monetary value. Things such as events that impact a company's reputation or employee morale. An example of this could be a software project that delivered a product with unknown bugs that could negatively impact the company's reputation. In this case, we can't identify a specific monetary cost of the impact, but know that it did nonetheless have an effect. Each of the risks will also have a risk category associated with it. You can choose from technical, quality, performance, project management, organizational, or external. You will also need to provide a risk description. Please be clear in the description of your risks so that all those that are viewing the risk analysis can fully understand what the risk is. For example, don't just put weather as your risk description, but rather include what type of weather is included in the risk. You will also specify a probability of occurrence. This is the probability that the risk will actually take place, as well as a magnitude of impact. If the risk does occur, what is the magnitude of the risk? The final thing that you will need to identify is the risk response that you will use to handle the risk. You can choose from the 8 risk responses listed. There are 5 risk responses that can be used for negative risks. These are escalate. This is for risks that are beyond the boundaries of the project. These risks need to be handled by the project management office or upper management. As a project manager, you are responsible for passing this risk on to the appropriate person. Avoid. This risk response is used when you plan to eliminate the risk or its cause. Transfer. This risk response transfers the risk and its consequences to a third party. The risk is still there, but the responsibility of managing it has shifted to someone else. Mitigate. This is used when you plan to lessen the impact of the risk, either by reducing the probability that the risk will occur or by reducing the impact to an acceptable level. The final risk response for negative risks is accept. This is where you acknowledge the risk but don't plan to take any action to manage it. There are also 5 positive risk responses available. Escalate and accept, which can be used for both positive and negative risks, as well as exploit. This is where you look to ensure that the risk will actually occur. Share. This risk response is similar to transfer because you will be assigning a third party to manage the opportunities of the risk. And the final one is enhance. This is where you will attempt to increase the probability and/or impact of the positive risk. Once you have identified all the project risks, it is now time to quantify the risks in the risk register. You will take all risks that you identified in the risk analysis, other than those that are low probability and low impact, to the risk register. Once you have transferred them to the risk register, you will need to complete the additional information for each risk. The risk owner is the person responsible for managing the risk. The date is the date that the risk was identified. You will then bring over the risk category, description, probability of occurrence, magnitude of impact, as well as the risk response from your risk analysis. For each of your quantitative risks, you will need to provide a quantitative probability, quantitative impact, as well as a quantitative value. The quantitative probability you already identified when you chose the probability of occurrence. In this case, we chose a probability of occurrence of medium, which carries with it a 40% quantitative probability. The quantitative impact is the cost of the risk occurring. For example, in this case, if the risk does occur, the cost will be $2,000. The spreadsheet is then to calculate your quantitative value by multiplying the quantitative probability by the quantitative impact. In this case, the probability was 40%, the quantitative impact was $2,000, so the quantitative value of the risk is $800. For each of the qualitative risks, you will leave these three fields blank. This is because you have identified that it's difficult or impossible to assign a monetary value to them. The final field that you'll need to provide is the action that will be done to carry out the risk response. Now that we've reviewed the risk analysis as well as the risk register, let's take a look at one of the examples provided for you. These examples pertain to a software project. Let's go ahead and look at the second risk identified, which is that the developers leave the project early. We have defined this as a quantitative risk because we can identify a monetary value associated with the risk. We have specified that it's an organizational risk because it is related to the project and the project team, and it's within our control. We've identified an impact of low, which correlates to 20%, as well as a magnitude of impact of high. In order to manage the risk, we plan to mitigate the probability of it occurring or its impact on the project. Because it is not a low probability of occurrence and a low magnitude of impact, we need to move this risk to the risk register. We have identified the risk owner as the project manager. It was identified as a risk on October 10th, and we carried over our risk category, our risk description, probability of occurrence, magnitude of impact, as well as the risk response. Because it is a quantitative risk, we then need to provide a quantitative probability and a quantitative impact. We carried over the 20% quantitative probability from our probability of occurrence, and we determined that the quantitative impact of that risk happening is $30,000. The quantitative value was then calculated as 20% of $30,000 or $6,000. We have identified the action of offering project completion bonuses as a way that we plan to mitigate the probability of the risk occurring. By offering a project completion bonus, we are encouraging the project members not to leave the project early. I hope this video has given you a good overview of how you can create a risk analysis and a risk register for your project. If you have any questions about this assignment, please do not hesitate to reach out to me.